The man was suddenly awakened by a stabbing pain. He rips off the bandages covering his eyes and freezes in shock. The next moment he finds himself trapped on a rock face thousands of meters high, with a bottomless pit at his feet. Looking up, his parachute was wrapped around a dead tree, which somehow turned out to be a lifesaver. But the entire rock wall was as smooth as a mirror. It was a salt pit. How was he supposed to climb it? The man quickly pulled out a dagger, hard into the soles of his shoes, and then took out 2 daggers and wedged them into the salt pit rock wall. He climbed upward with all his might, just wanting to get out of this terrible predicament. However, after barely 2 meters, the fragile daggers suddenly snapped. The support disappeared in an instant, and he plummeted. Fortunately, the parachute was still hanging on the branch, but just as he breathed a sigh of relief, the dead tree began to slowly break as it could not bear the weight. The man immediately tightened the parachute rope, drew his dagger and cut the rope quickly. Just as the parachute was about to collapse, he cut the rope, and one of his legs was heavily pressed against the rock wall of the salt pit, and his hands accidentally hooked into the rock crevice. Just when he almost gave up, he glanced upward. A goat was standing on the top of the rock, quietly licking the salt layer. Hope is revived. Forgetting all his fears, he decides to imitate the goat. With all his strength, he shoves his hand into the crack in the rock, his soul shuddering at the depths below him, which could lead to a 1,000-meter plunge to his death. But there is no turning back now, so he finds a pivot point on his hands and knees and begins to climb slowly. After a long, hard climb, he finally reaches a rocky outcrop, but doesn't have time to catch his breath. The underlying salt rock suddenly collapses, and the sound of falling debris echoes through the pit. Cautiously, he continues upward, finally leaping like a mountain goat to reach the edge of the roof with both hands. But by now he was so exhausted that no matter how hard he pushed, he couldn't reach the top. Just then, a goat came charging up from above, staring at him. The goat sniffs the air angrily, realizing that it is not one of its own kind, and without hesitation slams him downward. In the nick of time, the man clutches the rock with one hand and struggles with all his strength. The goat attacks again, and he grabs the horns. The goat pulls back in panic and drags him up to the top of the rock. The man collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath, then slowly raised his hand and gently stroked the top of the goat's head. His eyes were full of peace and gratitude.